like YK, myself. We have a lot of hosts, mentors who have put a lot of work in bringing this event together. We're thrilled to have you here for our exciting panel session, where we'll dive into the latest innovations and insights from leaders in tech, job market, hiring opportunities, and a lot more. We also have amazing mentors who will be introducing themselves and what they can offer you as a mentor. So they have their name tags as a mentor, so feel free to reach out to them if you need any help from them. We also have a surprise interview, which will be led by YK, so look out for that. Before we begin, I want to thank Lucas, Herman, and Arthur from Cornerstone College for letting us do this event and helping us out on a Sunday morning. They were here much before than us, so we have spoiled their Sunday morning. So let's give a huge round of applause for them. We are grateful to have jam.dev as our sponsor, which helped us in getting delicious food and coffee that you all are having. So feel free to enjoy that. Jam.dev is a bug report developers love. Now, get ready for the surprise interview that I just talked about. So I will let YK reveal that surprise.
Sure. I'll use this one.
All right, first of all, how's everyone doing? My name is YK. I run a community called CS Dojo Vancouver here. It started as a little YouTube channel several years ago, and it's been an in-person community for about a year now, and it's been amazing to see not just like the growth of the community, but also the support that everyone gets from this community. I've heard from a particular person that they got a job interview, from one of these meetups. So it's always good to see that. I'm curious, who here is from Vancouver Startup Week? All right, some of you. So it looks like the rest is from our community.
Yeah, thank you. And I forgot, while YK introduced himself, I forgot that I didn't introduce myself. So, hi, I am Nivedita Gaur. I am a silicon architect at Meta. I'm currently working on hardware of AR glasses. I'm an ex-ISRO scientist. And I love Vancouver vibe, to be very honest. I moved here in this January, and this community is amazing. Off to YK.
All right, before we get to the surprise interview, I want to say, one thing about this community, there are a bunch of tech communities that that have been active, some of them that became active last year, this year. And people might think like, what's special about our community? I've said this on our event page, but it's really the vibes. It's something people specifically say. I didn't just come up with it randomly. People say, oh, your events have great vibes, and it's really because of the people. It's really because of you guys and how you support each other. And one thing I would ask is, keep doing that. Like if you see someone being lost, or they're not sure about what to do, who to talk to, help them out, I would much appreciate it. And with that, I'm going to introduce someone I'm going to interview today. Surprise, surprise, Ahmad.
Hopefully a good surprise.
Yeah, hopefully a good surprise. We'll see.
But who is Ahmad? Can we know more about him?
Yes. Did you want to introduce yourself?
Hey everybody. Is it on? Hey, hello. Thanks a lot everybody for coming out here on a Sunday morning. I'm Ahmad. I'm currently founder and CEO of langbase.com. We are building sort of like an open source version of OpenAI, if that fits the definition, right? I've spent a huge part of my career building open source software. And I guess that's pretty much about me. Like, I think I'm here to talk a little bit about my journey, how I ended up here. And
yes.
I think I'll let YK ask the questions though.
Sounds good. So just to set the stage a little bit, the theme of this conference that Nivedita came up with is breaking barriers in tech, and I believe you broke a lot of barriers, through open source, through AI more recently, and I think the first thing that comes to my mind is you're not originally from here, and I believe a lot of people here are actually not originally from here. So how did you end up here?
Oh, always with a fun story, right? I was born and raised in Pakistan, and then because being in tech, I ended up becoming some sort of a digital nomad. But most of my professional career, I've been around the Bay Area, San Francisco. And about a year or so ago, I ended up in beautiful British Columbia. My wife and I, we both love it here. And yeah, that's how.
Right, and I think with your introduction, you were kind of underselling yourself in a way because you were a vice president of DevRel at a unicorn startup. I think you missed that part. So how did you get from like when you started in tech to like that position?
Oh, okay. I think that calls for a little bit of a detailed introduction. I come from a family of teachers. Both my parents and grandparents are teachers, so I always had this genetic bug in me of teaching, right? So that's how all of it started. In my family, extended family, before me, there are like 13 electrical engineers. So I ended up doing electrical engineering with computers as majors. But even when I was studying back in university, when AI was actually boring, right? I was more into product development, building the web, and that's how in early 2000s, I ended up joining this really smart group of people, which is not that known anymore. It's called a WhatsApp group. That group created Web 2.0, which is more famously known as HTML5, the HTML5 spec, which is how you can have an audio or a video player, which is how you have YouTube today, right? And early on, I got to saw a lot how advocacy in tech happens, how you create a spec for something that isn't out there yet, that isn't documented yet, and how do you build that? How do you get consensus of different stakeholders? When stakeholders are big companies like Google, Microsoft, with Chrome, and at that time Internet Explorer. So very early on, I got started in this weird space where I would be writing a lot of code, and I would be talking a lot to stakeholders. That's how I actually ended up in DevRel. DevRel is sort of a new field compared to a lot of other fields, tech or whatnot. Developer relations is mostly, if you understand developers, what their needs are, and you can write code, and you can talk to developers, that's mostly developer relations. I spent a better half of a decade building and writing code before I was into something called developer relations, right? I ended up at the core software of WordPress. I spent 16 years building the core software of WordPress. And from there, a lot of amazing things happened, right? I was this JavaScript guy embedded in PHP space, and my dream was, what if everything was JavaScript, right? And practically, I tell people, I'm practically living my dream right now. Everything is potentially JavaScript today, right? Back in the day, we ended up building a lot of state on the client side. And somehow I ended up contributing to this thing called Fax.js. How many people know Fax.js? Probably no one, right? Well, the other name of Fax.js is React.js. Right? How many people know React.js? Oh, there you go, right? So Fax.js was not really, it was mostly built by this guy who used to work at Facebook, now Meta, right? And because there were a bunch of other people involved, I was one of them. I ended up kind of convincing Facebook to open source Fax.js, right? And right off the bat, they said, no, we don't do open source, right? And that's where, a lot of my career actually comes from. I would write a lot of code. I wouldn't know what to do with it. I wouldn't know, like a lot of times when we write code, we don't know how to sell it, how to make money off of it, right? So potentially, personally, the best thing I thought I could do was just put it out there, even if it is like a bunch of small lines of code, right? In, I think, last 20 years or so, I have ended up building over 200 small projects that are open source. they are downloaded billions of times every single year. So I would assume it's useful, right? And a small part of that actually ended up in React.js, Webpack, WordPress, Node.js, and the core of Next.js. So I like to think of myself as somebody who kind of helped build a very small part of the web as we know of it today, right? And after a lot of struggle, Facebook ultimately realized that there is this thing called open source. No matter how Microsoft used to be very much against open source at that time, right? But I think open source, Facebook did take an early bet on open source. There was a PR nightmare. I could tell you stories how we ended up there, but ultimately Facebook started the open source org, out of which we got React.js, GraphQL, then PyTorch, and now Llama, right? So a lot of good things have happened to a lot of people building a lot of code, putting it out there for free and completely open source.
Cool. So I think, I'm not sure about the audience exactly, but my best guess would be, mostly junior-ish, and then some mid-senior and senior, especially on the mentor side. And I think the biggest challenge right now, especially in Vancouver, is kind of breaking into tech and also, I guess, advancing. And for you, it seems like your work with WordPress played a huge part of it. So how did you get into it? Was it through open source?
So I think I have this theory. I think content has this innate ability to be managed, right? I remember a particular time when I had to send somebody an email to write a comment on their website. They would take my email, put the content, download it, put it in an HTML file somewhere, put it on FTP, and 72 hours later we would have a comment. And that's how I ended up at WordPress. We were creating the first PHP form, right? So you could just write a comment, submit, and there you go, right? That was revolutionary, and that is why content management systems started to grow up in early 2000s. WordPress is one of them, right? Where content being written by people or computer was required to be managed more than just code, right? And I can't help but make this sort of like weird analogy that the same thing is happening today. AI is generally, right now, the AI that we generally call it the LLM space, the large language model space, the chat GPT space, it is actually a lot more about content, right? And again, content has this innate ability to be managed. We need to build a lot of content management systems around how the AI content that is being generated, the content that you are writing and being fed into AI. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think we are sort of in this space where, so software used to be a system of storage, right? We got Microsoft Excel. We stopped writing things on our notepads and we started putting our accounting data in Microsoft Excel. Then software became a system of, let's say, records, right? We got Google Sheets. Everybody had access to the same sheet that was local before with Microsoft Excel, right? Now software is becoming a system of prediction and execution, right? Software can actually help. Software can think. With this AI, it can analyze like a human. So it's a new paradigm of software being built right now as we go through it. I think the amount of jobs that are going to be created through this are going to be massive. The opportunity is massive because we need to write the same software toolchain around a completely new technology that doesn't exist. You know how software is tested? I was just talking to someone outside, somebody who is a test automation engineer. You know, you cannot test AI right now. It is subjective. Ask it the same question twice, it will not respond. It's super subjective, right? How can you build something on top of something that is so subjective, right? So there are so many more things that we need to build on top of this. So I think a lot of people get scared about AI is going to take my job, right?
Right. Yeah. So I think we're gonna get into all of those and your involvement in that. But one thing that I think a lot of people here would be interested in is basically how you got into Silicon Valley and here to some extent, because I remember when we first started to talk online, you were not here. I guess you would visit the Bay Area from now and then. But how do you go from basically not being in the U.S., not being in that area to actually being involved in a scene?
Oh, so how do you break in? Literally, why we are here. I can only share how I did it myself. I wrote a lot of code, and a lot of people, teams started getting dependent on that, right? The first time actually somebody at Google reached out, I thought it was like somebody playing a joke on me. They were like, we are using this thing you wrote and we want to update it or expand it. We thought, why not hire you, right? So the same thing is like, I think if you write a lot of code and put it out there, there's an opportunity that someone will end up using it, right? I know it's really hard. A lot of people get kind of stuck at, oh, what should I create? Don't think of it like this. Think of it like anything that you see that you will potentially reuse, put it on GitHub, right? Even if it is just a few lines of code. I have 3 lines of code in a Node module called cross-platform clear. When you need to clear your terminal, in different OSs you have to do it differently. Just 1 line of code. It gets downloaded 11 million times every month, right? Wow. So it's just 1 line of code, right? The same way, I found out in 2021 that a small chunk of piece of software that I had written ended up at NASA Mars Ingenuity helicopter mission, right? So if you're not putting your code out there, this is amazing amount of surface area that you can increase by just putting your code out there. Has to be a little bit documented. It's not just, here's my code, I'm done with it, right? Put something in the README, how to use it, what is it for. And the idea is that if you do this, people will know what your code is like. They will probably use it. And that's how you can potentially start breaking into tech, right? There's one more thing to it. You can also do it in the reverse order. You can find a good open source product, right, that is out there, has a company around it, they are hiring or not. It's open source, but it's, building a company, right? Let's say there's this company called cal.com. It's a Calendly alternative, right? All of their code is open source, super base. All of it is open source. Right? Go through their GitHub issues, look at what they are looking for, spend 6 months on it, right? Find 1 or 2 such projects. You don't have to find 100 projects, right? Create a really good pull request in that open source project and get it accepted. It will take a lot, it will take a bunch of effort. But then you will be able to say, well, I contributed code to a company, production ready code that took me about 6 months to get in. It's a huge PR. And I was able to talk to a bunch of stakeholders. I was able to understand what it takes to ship code in production. And then you'll be like, I don't know, 10 times more hireable. Probably at the same company.
One thing I would add is, if you do a 6 months PR, don't do it in like darkness. Talk to the people there. Make sure you're going in the right direction before you suddenly send like a 500-line PR.
Of course, I don't want to say the PR should be huge, right? What I mean by that is go through their issues, just like YK said, right? Learn what their problems are. Start volunteering, right? You can land small PRs right away, but in 6 months, the goal should be that you do some sort of small critical work for them for free. Yeah, that's why it's free and open source, right? But that will help you build portfolio that is beyond anything. A lot of young tech people that I talk to, they're like, well, I built Next.js or Netflix clone. That's the most common thing that a lot of people do. Or I built a clone of Twitter to try out. That's good, but were you able to ship it in a production ready code in some product that is actually being sold, bought, and helping people? No, right? So it's part of it. You can build your own code, put it out there, open source, that's good. But you have to complement it with, I'm contributing to this open source project, which is being used by Google or somebody big, which has a company behind it, right? That hits differently, right? And you will learn so much while doing this. It's like you're sort of on a job part-time, looking into things, and that will prepare you a lot for what kind of company you want to work with, what kind of opportunities you tend to enjoy. And I think the part of breaking into tech would become easier just because you will have shipped code in something that is production ready.
Cool. I think that's amazing advice. I think we have a couple more minutes left. I'm not sure exactly. But let's get into AI, right? So, I think if you could tell us like the whole thing about it, basically how you got into AI in the first place with OpenAI. You told me about it before, and then how you decided to build your own company around it, and is AI replacing our jobs?
I think the first thing I'll just start with is, I don't think AI will replace software development or software developers, but I definitely think that a software developer using AI will have a good chance of replacing a software developer not using AI, right? AI is a tool that helps you do a lot of grunt work. It helps you be a lot more productive. That's what this is right now, right? It can think like us. It's based on top of an algorithm called self-attention. We have attention, just like I can go back in time and tell you, like, when I was 20 years old, I didn't know shit, right? I was at this college, I was doing this or that. If you train an AI, it can think like human. That's what self-attention is all about. It can think, it thinks of that training as its own life, right? So anything you have, your notes or a YouTube video that you cannot go through, you can use AI to summarize it, to get wisdom out of it in a very quick way, without actually doing that grunt work yourself, right? And that's just how it gets, it's just how you get started. Start summarizing things. 6 months down the road, you will know a lot more about AI. You would know a lot more about how you can use it at work or whatnot. And that's literally practically what happened to me, right? 4.5 years ago. So this one fun bit about me, I don't watch news, I watch a lot of TV. I was the last person on earth to figure out COVID is real. And then there was this inside joke, now you gotta watch news, right? And instead I built something called Corona CLI, open sourced it. It's like Perplexity, but for COVID data. You could ask it questions like, what are the chances of me getting COVID if I go from 2nd Street to 4th Street to pick up this thing, right? Stuff like this. And when COVID became a global pandemic, my open source CLI tool became a thing. We got 6 billion API requests in the first 1.5 months, right? Google picked up the tab, so I didn't have to care about the cost or whatnot. But that's how I actually ended up getting an email from Sam Altman and Greg Buckman. They're like, we are this non-profit AI company. Like, two things I don't care about, AI and non-profit. This is me, 4 years ago. Now I'm building a company in this space, right? And we ended up chatting a lot about how API and AI are really cool. I think AI is now becoming an API, right? A lot of people don't understand when I say things like this. Think of it like Photoshop. When I would do a Photoshop workshop, I would spend 45 minutes just installing Photoshop in everybody's computer, right? And then we got Figma, figma.com. Just go to figma.com and listen to what I'm saying, right? I think the same thing is happening with machine learning. The barrier of entry in machine learning was very hard. You had to do a PhD or whatnot, and then a very cool, awesome machine with a bunch of GPUs and whatnot. And now, all of that is an API. Anybody who knows how to send an API request can use all of that without the infrastructure, without the PhD, without any of that, right? So the barrier of entry has lowered a lot, right? So anybody who can send an API request can now use machine learning to their advantage. That was not true 2 years ago, like a couple of years ago. So that's what's changing, right? And any software developer can potentially learn to send an API request. That's like the entire web is an API request, right? So that's what's happening, right? It's a new form of tool that if you learn, you can increase your chances of getting hired. A lot of the software tools in AI doesn't even exist yet. There is a huge chance you will be the one person to invent or build some of it, or build a core part of it. Just like, 20 years ago, I was building PHP forms, right? We didn't have PHP forms, right? So a lot of things are being built right now. 5 years ago, there was not much new in tech, right? There's a lot of new stuff right now in tech, right? And that's why we saw like about $28 billion worth of investment just last year in this space. So a lot of money is being thrown, not in research, but in practical applied generative AI jobs, which is what we now call AI, right? Which is completely different from what people in universities study back in the day, right? So it's a new space for everybody, even for if you have a PhD, even then this is a new space, right? So yeah.
Great. I think we're gonna wrap it up, pretty soon. But one thing I want to sort of add to it is that, as a technology professional, as a software developer, as a product manager, whatever you do, the advantage that you have is that you can invent, one of these pieces, right? Like you just said. One example from my own life is I wanted a tool to kind of help me analyze open source projects. So I built a custom GPT for it, and I used GPT-4o for it. So it's kind of like a little bit meta, but I think it's amazing that you can just be one person. You don't have to have a team necessarily, and you can build a lot these days.
Yeah, like for example, I had a job description, and I was hiring for this particular piece of tech that we wanted to build. And I built a bot of sorts that takes in your resume and the job description and just gives me the top 10 candidates. Right? I don't have to go through that. So one part of that is, you basically took away all of the human resources, HR, recruitment, all of that processes. But then again, that's not my forte. I don't want to do this. So an HR person or a recruiter who can do this for me, I would hire them, because that person alone would be doing 10%'s job, right? I recently learned what technology means. It means accelerating human capabilities. I didn't know. So all sorts of tech that we got is for accelerating human capabilities, right? So AI is here to accelerate your capabilities no matter what those capabilities are. You could be in recruitment, you could be in sales, you could be in product, you could be in tech, writing software. All of those things you can get to do twice or thrice as much in the same time, more productively with AI. Right?
Cool. I think that's a perfect note to end this session. Thank you so much, Ahmad.
Well, thanks a lot for having me here.
Let's take 5-minute coffee break for everyone, and we'll meet here again in 5 minutes.